It stood on the edge of town, like a scar no one wanted to remember. The old Unionton Hospital. Its windows were blackened eyes, staring into a past no one dared to revisit. For decades, the locals whispered warnings to those who entered that they would never leave unchanged. But on a cold winter's night, three friends decided to ignore those warnings. Drawn by curiosity and the thrill of the unknown, they believed they were just having fun. But in the darkness of the hospital's empty corridors, something found them. And by morning, none of them would see the world the same. I'm the Gingerbeard Man, and if you're a fan of the macabre, mysterious, or miraculous, told from a South African or African perspective, then you've come to the right place. Today's story was inspired by my good friend Henku Oaks. Thank you, Mabut. So, buckle up, get ready. Let's get into today's story. On July 16th, 2011, Clifford and Kutlana waited outside the entrance of the Southgate shopping mall for their friend Rajesh to arrive. The men hugged their jackets close to them, trying to keep themselves warm on the cold winter's evening. Clifford looked at his watch. 9 p.m. Typical. Late as usual, he muttered. Kutlana tapped him on the back gently, smiling. That's Rajesh for you. The words had barely left his mouth when they saw the blue polo pulling into the parking lot. The three men had met in grade 8 and had been friends ever since. They shared many interests, including soccer, LARPing, and online gaming. But their biggest love was horror. Horror movies, horror stories. In fact, they were into anything strange, dark, and mysterious. The two men climbed into the polo and they headed for the exit. They took a right onto Columbine Avenue and made their way to the highway. After greeting each other, it did not take very long for the men to start discussing the plans they had made for that evening. Now, Rajesh had recently got married, and his brother-in-law was a commercial realtor. Rajesh and his brother-in-law Raiden hit it off immediately, and when Rajesh discovered that Raiden had recently acquired the sole mandate for the old abandoned Unionton Hospital, he felt as if he had just hit the jackpot. Now, of course, Rajesh had no interest whatsoever in buying the old hospital, but he had long heard stories of how haunted it was and how people who visited it never came back the same. The trio just had to explore the hospital and see for themselves. They got into the highway and Rajesh took out his cell phone and called Raiden to inform him that they'd be more or less 30 minutes or so. He hung up and the chatter started once again. Kutlano, did you manage to get everything? Rajesh said. Kutlana opened a gym bag and read the items out aloud as he spotted them in the bag. Torches, check. Walkie-talkies, check. Cameras, check. But I didn't get the Red Bulls. I didn't want them to get warm. Clifford looked at him sarcastically. Sure, because in this heat, it'll take no time at all for that to happen. Easy, boys, easy, Rajesh said. Now, let's go through the rules again. Number 1, don't go anywhere alone. Number 2, always report to which area you're moving to. And number 3, if you get lost, take the emergency stairs to the car park exit. They pulled into the parking lot of a shopping centre adjacent to the hospital. It was deserted, except for the red BMW belonging to Raiden. They parked next to it and the men got out. Rajesh introduced everyone to each other, after which Raiden asked the group to join him by the trunk of his car. He opened the boot and pulled out a box, and then began handing out bright orange bibs to everybody. He put one on himself. After that, he pulled out a set of tags which were attached to lanyards. He instructed all the men to put a tag on. Kutlano was about to read the tag, but was stopped when Raiden spoke up. Sorry guys, the bibs and the tags are just an extra precaution. I am allowed to be here, and you guys are helping me evaluate the property. But at times, the neighbors can be a bit nosy, and I don't think they know that we are here to evaluate the property. The men all laughed and agreed. They got to the corner of the old hospital when a neighbour from across the road beckoned them over. The old lady was suspicious of what they were up to at 10 p.m. outside the old hospital. Raiden walked from the group and explained to her that they were there to evaluate the property. He even showed her the clipboard. This seemed to satisfy her. The group started walking back to the hospital when she called him out again. "Whatever you do," she said, "do not remove anything from the hospital." Kutlana was the first to speak up. "Why not?" The lady looked at him dead in the eye. "Because bad things have happened to people who take things out of this hospital. The last group of people met horrible fates. One was killed in a gruesome car accident. Another is now a permanent resident in a psychiatric ward. And the last person, he gouged his eyes out until he bled to death." They reached the main gate and a security guard came out to meet them immediately. Raiden walked ahead of the group to talk to the security guard. All was not going according to plan, as the security guard didn't seem to care or believe that Raiden was a real estate agent and was in charge of the selling this property. Eventually, the group saw Raiden take out a 200 note and give it to the man. This was to allow them to enter. Raiden returned to the group looking slightly disappointed. "Jen, sorry, we'll have to make this a quick trip. The security guard is being a hard ass, and he wants 100 rand per hour we are in this hospital. Unfortunately, all I had on me was a 200 rand note. After 2 hours, he said he's going to call the cops." The men grumbled, but they thanked Raiden regardless for his efforts and moved on. Once inside, it was decided that Clifford and Kutlana would pair up, which left Rajesh and Raiden to team up. Clifford and Kutlana would head to the emergency room first, and Rajesh and Raiden would check out the pediatric ward, as Rajesh had heard that this was the most haunted place in the entire hospital. Before parting, the group checked their equipment: flashlights, walkie-talkies, as well as the 2 cameras, after which they parted ways. The temperature immediately dropped when Rajesh and Raiden entered the main hallway of the pediatric ward. Rajesh turned to look at Raiden, and he could see that there was already cold breath coming out of his mouth, despite the fact that the hospital in general was pretty warm. They looked at each other and nodded their heads anxiously, carrying on along the dark corridor. They had gotten about halfway through the corridor when they froze in their tracks. Something was moving behind them. The 2 men turned around in time just to see a little girl running across the hallway from one room to the next. Rajesh flipped open the hatch of the camera and pointed it down the hallway, hand shaking slightly. There was a child's laughter coming from the room that the little girl had just run into. As they approached, the laughing became louder, more sinister. Slowly, they pushed the door open. There, in the corner of the room, hiding behind an overturned bed, was the little girl with pigtails. She slowly walked towards them with her head down. They noticed that her hair was stained red from blood, and a black liquid was dripping out of her face. The little girl slowly lifted her head to reveal that her eyes were missing. A black goo was spilling out of her empty eye sockets. Raiden nudged Rajesh. "Let's get the hell out of here," he managed to whisper out. But Rajesh was still staring at the girl through the camera flap, unable to look away. "Rajesh!" Raiden bellowed, grabbing his arm and snapping him out of his trance. He looked blankly at Raiden. "Let's go," he said with more urgency. They turned and began briskly walking out of the room, the little girl's footsteps following closely. Once they had crossed the threshold of the room, the men turned around and shone their light into the room where they had seen the little girl. She had vanished. On the other side of the hospital, Clifford and Kutlana were exploring the emergency room, eventually finding themselves entering the trauma center. They lit the room up with their torches to get a better look of the room. In the center of the room was an operating table. The sheets that were still on it were stained red and orange. Kutlana noticed a set of reports on a nearby table. The date on the reports was the 25th of December, 1996. He remembered reading that the hospital closed the very next day. for no given reason. "Hey Clifford, check this out," he said, and handed the report to Clifford. Clifford skimmed through it briefly before throwing it to the floor. Close to where the reports landed, he noticed there was a smear of blood, something he didn't remember seeing when they had first entered the room. He followed the path of blood with the light from his torch until he saw it sneak under one of the doors and veer to the right. "Hey Kutlano, check this." Kutlano was no longer behind him. Clifford scanned the room until he saw something standing in the far corner. It was Kutlano, his arms to his side, his gaze to the floor. "Haha, very funny, dude. This isn't the Blair Witch Project," he said. He had just about reached Kutlano, put his arm out to grab him, when he heard a voice from behind him. "What did you say about the Blair Witch Project, dude?" Clifford's blood ran cold. He turned around to see that Kutlano was standing in the doorway, drinking his Red Bull. Clifford slowly turned to the figure in the corner. It too had vanished. "Hey bro, let's get out of here." Kutlano took a big sip of his Red Bull. "Yeah, sure. I'm bored anyway." Kutlano took the walkie-talkie and held the button down to talk. "Come in." Static. "Rajesh, Raiden, are you there?" Static. He was about to speak again when suddenly the radio crackled to life with the sounds of children's laughter. Then silence. Then the nursery rhyme, Ring-a-Ring-a-Rosies, began playing through the radio. Kutlano and Clifford stared at each other, not knowing what to make of all of this. Clifford's face began to distort into fear as he slowly pointed to the wall behind Kutlano. There was a small stream of liquid trickling down the wall. The pair made their way closer to get a better look. All of a sudden, another stream appeared. Then another, and another, and another. Kutlano almost dropped his flashlight when he realized the liquid was blood. Clifford took a step back and felt his shoes stick to the floor. He shone his light downwards. A pool of blood began covering the entire floor. "Let's get out of here," he bellowed. Clifford and Kutlano began running, blood splattering everywhere. Once out of the room, the radio crackled to life once more. "Kutlano, Clifford, come in." Clifford pointed his flashlight to the room they had just exited. The room was now completely empty. No blood, no operating table, no files. The men were unable to speak, their trance eventually broken when the radio crackled again. Kutlano pushed the button and answered. He told Rajesh that they had to meet. Rajesh agreed. 10 minutes later, the men decided to meet at the cafe on the lower level of the hospital. The men shared their experiences, after which they sat down in silence. "How much time do we have?" asked Clifford. Raiden looked at his watch. It was 11:30. "We have 30 minutes, Raiden replied. "I don't know about you guys, but I have seen my fair share of creepy things for one night." He looked around the table. Everyone was slowly nodding their heads. All except for Kutlano. "Yeah, we've been seeing some strange things tonight, but shouldn't we use the opportunity to the fullest," he said. Raiden looked at him. "Let's take it to a vote. All in favor of leaving the hospital now, raise your hand." All the men raised their hands, all except for Kutlano. Finally he sighed. "Fine, I guess it was fun while it lasted." They made their way out to the main exit. The security guard was looking at his watch. "Oh, back so soon," he said. Kutlano shot him a dirty look. As they crossed the road, Raiden's phone rang. He started speaking, then put his hand over the mouthpiece. "Sorry guys, I've got to run. It's been real. Really real." The men came over to shake his hand, silently thanking him for the evening that they had experienced. With that, Raiden looked left, then right, and crossed the road in a jog. He got into his car, gave a hoot and a final wave, and then left. The three men got back to their car, feeling exhausted but awake at the same time. They started chatting feverishly as the Polo got onto the highway. At some point in their journey, Rajesh cracked a joke, and everyone started roaring with laughter. Clifford threw his head to the side in hysterics. While doing so, he saw the name tag still hanging from Kutlano's neck. His laughter died immediately. Earlier that evening, when they put on their name tags, No one had paid attention to what was written on the name tags. If they did, they would never have worn them. On the tag, it clearly read, Unionton Hospital Visitor, and the date of the stamp read, Wednesday, 25th of December, 1996. He sat up immediately. Hey guys, didn't that old lady say to take nothing from the hospital? Still laughing, Rajesh asked him, Why? Did you swap some old medicine? Clifford was not smiling, and his cold expression began to concern Kutlwano. Check your tags, he said quietly. Both Kutlwano and Rajesh checked their tags that they had been given by Raiden. I can't believe he... Rajesh! Kutlwano screamed, pointing to the oncoming truck. Rajesh tried his best to swerve, but it was too late. They hit the truck head on, Kutlwano dying instantly. A week later, Raiden sat at a mug and bean, reading the local paper. He read about the 3 friends who had visited the old hospital a week before, all who had got into a horrible car accident the same night. One had died instantly. One bled to death for gouging out his eyes with a fork, and one is now a permanent resident at a psychiatric hospital after slicing off his ears, not being able to get sounds out of his head. Raiden looked up from the paper and smiled, his eyes flashing black, then back to normal. Some places keep their secrets buried. Others let them out just long enough to claim another soul. If you ever find yourself standing before a place like the old Unionton Hospital, remember, curiosity might open the door, but something else decides if you walk back out. Let me know in the comments below if you could find any of my horror movie pop culture references. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious. God bless.